Hello, 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 people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. We are back with basically a full house. That must mean that nothing happened over the last couple weeks when we were gone. As far as I know, nothing has happened recently. I'm sure we can talk about all the nothingness that has happened. Before we get too far and we get into asking how people are, I want to thank our wonderful, beautiful patrons, John Hunt, Frank Anthony, Aaron J., Christopher Cohn, Harry Austin, John Fuller, Michael Fuchs, Joshua Duder, and Noah Telford. Thank you so much for supporting us and getting early access on some things and just helping us out is really kind of you. You don't have to do it, but we really appreciate you. And I want to go ahead and just kind of ask how people are. So the person to my right, Alan, how are you?
Good. I'm cold, but good. There's a thing called weather here in California, which happens like seldomly, so we're experiencing it. But I'm glad to have an evening to spend with white guys and beards and Kaler. Yeah, things are going great. Things are going great. I am happy.
Fair enough. Speaking of one of the white guys with beards, Phil.
Yeah, happy to be back. Just another uneventful, week in American soccer, and I've spent this time. I think people may have seen it by now, but I wrote a little thing for Protagonist where I imagined that I was a Netflix executive and commissioned a bunch of USL documentaries. And now I'm living in that world, and just I'm really upset about the fact that none of them are real, and that we're not getting the 30 Days of Lights, Las Vegas Lights documentary that I want to produce.
I mean, 30 days until kickoff, a 30 for 30, and each 30 is a 30 is just one day before kickoff would have been perfect. I'm still pitching my Friday Night Tykes version of USL Show Parents or like USL Parents would have been fun. Speaking of other white guy with beard, John, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Happy to be back, Adam. Luckily, we've got nothing but bureaucracy to talk about today, which is always fun. So,
I mean, yeah. Someone who, because you don't have a picture on today, I'm going to assume you're also a white guy with a giant beard. Ryan.
I'm doing well, and it's just I guess we'll talk about it later on the show. Who's had a worse month of February that starts with the letter M? Major League Soccer or Madam Web?
Major League Baseball with their uniforms.
ooh,
Oof.
yeah, jeez.
I mean, lots of bad week for the M's, bad month for the M's.
Mariners too.
Couple things before we get into this episode. I want to just go ahead and share because we haven't been able to do it on here. The new USL Show kit that is coming out. I'm super excited about this one. This one was our splatter kit. There's been a slight update to the design from the one that was originally posted. The other one had the P logo that I have on mine, but now has the widespread Protagonist logo on it. Just like the rest of our kits that we have done, we get 0% of this. We do not take a single bit of the profits. We are all about giving back to the people and giving back to places that need it. So we are working with Backyard Footy, which if you've ever heard this guy named Hugh Roberts II, the most minutes, I think, in USL history in general. It is his foundation that gives back to local communities. I believe it's going to be in Charlotte since that's where he is now. Just a really good cause. We're super excited about it. At the very least, just share it around. Just share the kit around. Somebody might like it, even if you don't have the money to buy it right now, that's totally fair. Just take the time, share it around. It's going to be in our description. It's about to be in our live chat. Yeah, super excited about that. Shout out to Olive in York for putting together a sick design, which was inspired by Philip Fox, which is super fun.
I just like it because if I spill ketchup on it, no one will notice.
Yeah,
I love that protagonist word mark that makes it look like a straight edge hardcore band. So I'm enjoying the aesthetics from this one. Plus, like, I mean, following up the the last kit with now a collared kit. We're serving all types of Lukes out here.
True. Yeah. Before we get into everything, and we are 6 minutes into this, so I know we're super far into this, but tonight's order of the show, we're talking about Vegas first. USLW League and League Two had their schedule and divisions released, so that's exciting. Super League going D1, and allegedly there was some more US Open Cup drama, and that one is last, not because we want you to stick around, but because frankly, it's going to be probably the longest conversation, and we need to not cut the other conversation short because of that one. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and jump into our my cat. Please, munch on that, dummy.
Is this cat issues?
Yeah, the cat has decided to eat a plant. I worked hard on that plant.
The magic of live podcasting.
Taylor's cat corner.
Yeah, the cat decided to eat a plant that I have been growing for a year. Stupid.
Signing for Vegas.
They only decided to do that while we're going live. You have been alone in this house for weeks now and not did it until now. Thanks. So Vegas is alive, and we did this thing with the Miami FC where they decided, oops, all Italians, and Jose Bautista was like, I love guys from the Dominican Republic. I wonder why, and it's just going full send on it, and it's honestly been really fun.
Yeah, the world-renowned Dominican Charlie Adams is is the top of that list.
Is there a less Dominican person?
No.
No, but I think, just speaking to the Dominican contingent, and we'll get into Adams, like Ricky Alba, who they got over from Scandinavia, is somebody who is really good on both feet. He's really quick. You can put him left, right, center. I think he'd make a really great false nine in the Dennis Sanchez system. Edison Escona is somebody who's got a lot of hype with the Miami system. He played in the World Cup. He's somebody who brings a ton of talent. Based on the construction of the roster, I wonder if he's going to maybe be more of a number 10, just given that they're pretty winger heavy right now. But with that level of technique they've already got in this attack, they're going to be a tricky team to play against. They're going to be a fun team to watch. It's crazy to be saying that about Las Vegas, who typically is pretty dreadful on all accounts. So just promising stuff from the lights right now.
Yeah, I think you have to be pleased, especially adding someone like Joe Zhao.
Yeah.
Like, did not see that coming in any way. And the fact that they've gone and done that piece of business. And just, I know we joke about the Charlie Adams thing, but they've shown a ton of of ambition, I guess. And like the first player that they announced in the offseason was a player who had already been announced for another team. Like that is the definition of ballsy.
And he was like the marquee signing for Tulsa that was left. Like, that's big from Bautista. Yeah.
Yeah. Like taking big swings, Joey Bats. And so, I think in general, they've just shown a lot of ambition, and in an offseason where we sort of assumed, okay, there's only a month to go. They're gonna like slapdash together whatever they can. They've gone out and done some really serious business. Azcona, I'm excited to see him maybe get handed the keys a little bit, because in his short stint with Locomotive, he never really got a chance to show like what he's about at a championship level. So I would be really interested to see what he can do if he's given that number 10 role in Vegas.
And it's just good to see Las Vegas actually going into this season with a little bit of a change of ambition. And Nicholas Murray, in his article earlier today, mentioned that a lot of their players have just been rentals, or just players that you weren't going to build a future around. They're someone else's players. But to go into this season with a plan in place and to try and establish themselves as a kind of basically a reboot of Las Vegas, if you will, it just seems like it's a brand new hello for the team.
Yeah, they have some good mix of some established players too. Like we talked about Adam, we talked about like Emmer Clemente is another name that he's been around in the league for a minute. I have a soft spot for him from when he played in San Diego. But it's just a good mix of some young talent with some guys who've been in the league for a minute, who kind of understand USL and the landscape and like what it's like to play in a crazy league that is USL. Apparently, Kaler's cat has now eaten his camera. Oh, look, he's back. This segment brought to you by Fiber.
Yeah, and just thinking further about the roster build so far, like you've got a really good mix of young players, like Coleman Gannon, who they got from Columbus Crew 2, somebody in his early 20s. He's got USL experience with Atlanta too, a couple years back. Joe Hafferty, a young fullback who Dennis Sanchez knows from the Austin campaign last season. Christian Pinzon, who was dynamite at the end of 2022 and had a rough season because basically everyone for RGV had a rough season. Like, I don't know if I want to go out and declare that Vegas is going to be a contender. I mean, not to tease, but I think they've got some signings coming up that are going to be things that maybe push them in that direction. But just so far, like what they've done is a massive change of culture from what we've seen previously. So good to see you from the lights.
Vegas is doing this thing that North Carolina discovered like a year ago, which is called investment. And it's really crazy what happens when you do that thing called investment. Putting money into a roster and into a team is, believe it or not, a good thing, and is rarely a bad thing.
I just want to know who in this whole setup like set up the meeting with Jose Bautista to like make this all happen. Like, I just want to know how it came together, because it came pretty much out of left field, like in terms of baseball pun intended. It won't be the last this season with Locomotive still on a baseball field. But anyways, I think the one question mark, obviously, and like John, you're kind of hinting at like what they've got cooking. I think like the question mark is how much they can fill this out with like genuine top level talent, because as good as the business has been so far, they are still like short of half a roster. And they do have like quite a bit of work to do to just make sure that this is a full on, like, to be a full on contender.
I don't want this to be put as like East versus West already at all. And I want to go ahead and get ahead of this in saying that the top of the West is still ridiculous. But the 1 seed through the 10 seed theoretically in the East feels somewhat close-ish to me.
This is Loudon slander.
I'm not counting Loudon. Now, that said, I feel like the bottom, like the playoff line in the West is still kind of open for me, especially as FC Tulsa is now being picked apart by what I'm assuming is if our coach leaves, we can leave too clause in all of their contracts. If Vegas can keep filling out a couple of their big signings that are on the way, and even just get some young, exciting talent from the college ranks that hasn't been poached, or some, maybe if they want to keep buying players going down to League One, or, just filling out the roster with just normal bench pieces, still maybe a playoff contending team out in the West.
And by the way, like, how did they get in Tom Bogert's ear that he's just like tweeting out every like rotation player that they're signing? Like, good for them with that, but what a coup.
I mean, speaking of Jose Bautista, my brain is just telling me that someone said, "Hey, that they're trying to move baseball out to Las Vegas, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they said, how would you feel about investing in one of the baseball parks in Las Vegas? And just did not reiterate anymore.
I do think with Tom Bogert like sort of emerging as the Woj of soccer Twitter, how has a Bogue bomb not become a thing?
That's already a thing in one of my group chats.
Okay, well then we're on the same
It
page.
I hate the sound of it.
You don't have to like it, you just have to accept it. That's the
I need to let this be known that I have not played Fortnite in a very long time, but my kids are obsessed with it. I think they would probably call it a bogey bomb. So somebody got that. I don't know.
I love that you're a teacher who calls them my kids.
That's because today was a good day. So yeah. I'm excited about Vegas actually investing. That's just fun. We've been waiting for a long time for just minimal investment, and I don't know. It's just nice to see. If it's cool with everybody else, I think let's move on to League 2 W League. USL, if anybody has anything else on Vegas. No? Cool. Okay, so USL League 2 and W League have announced their divisions. We're not going to go through all, I think it's 160 independent clubs across both leagues, but a couple of things for me. There was a couple of teams that have kind of dropped out of the fray, which is always sad to see, but really it's 6 clubs from both League 2 and W League that are sort of unaccounted for, which obviously 6 clubs out of a league dropping out is bad, but when you consider the fact that those are like 100 club leagues and it's the semi-professional where teams just kind of join whatever is financially viable, whether that's league cost or that's travel cost or whatever they're doing, it's pretty solid, continuity across the board. And with more and more teams adding, and the thing I'm loving, teams are already announcing roster signings. It's really fun. I'm loving what we're getting out of League 2 and W League right now.
So in the Deep North division, we have Bavaria. Oh, we're not doing. Sorry.
No, that'll be a Patreon exclusive where we each get to read off a division.
No, I mean, it was a big week for League 2 in terms of the developmental pipeline. Like, if you think about the Connor Antley story with him starting with Tormenta when they were in that division, then you're announcing the record number of 128 clubs in that tier. It speaks to the fact that League 2 is such an important step in the developmental ladder. If you're the kind of person who is looking at like the PR announcements that clubs put out when they sign a new player, the number of times you see a League 2 team that you've never heard of in your life mentioned, but that actually served as a really impressive proving ground for a lot of talented soccer players, crucial to the way that players move up the ladder. Amazing to see how they've continued to flourish as a division. Ditto for the W League, which, I mean, as we get into the Super League discussion later, the W League is going to be an amazing pipeline to get players into that semi-professional tier, then move them on into the Super League, that Division 1 environment. I think the W is May to July this year. It's impressed me in terms of the level of play whenever I've checked it out, which is mostly Indy 11, who they get it done. They know what they're doing. But yeah, excited to see everything going into the new year on both leagues here.
And I think one of the things that is most exciting about both USL League 2 and the W League is the amount of teams that have, like, the amount of clubs that have teams in both competitions, like a men's side and a women's side, one League 2, one W League, like seeing continuity of clubs like across men's and women's, just like, you know, reinforcing that what we've talked about with the introduction of the Super League and like with all of this expansion of the women's game as well, like seeing that continuity amongst clubs and offering opportunities in both the men's and women's side is like, that is awesome. And I did want to shout out from my hometown of Aurora, Illinois, Riverlight FC, one of those clubs that is an expansion team this year in the 2 and the W as well. And just really like the opportunities that it opens up for communities to start this pipeline. Plus they got a map kit, so I mean, you cannot go wrong there.
Check it out on kit season.
And you speak to the continuity. It's we'd be remiss to not mention it from chat that Des Moines Menace is entering their 30th anniversary as a club, which is just astounding for USL 2, just for the history that Des Moines Menace brings to the competition and their commitment to still wanting to have success on and off the field, to have sustainable soccer, especially within Iowa. It's just been incredible.
Also, oh gosh, I'm mess up. The Pioneers, Western Mass.
Yeah.
I mean, going from professional to semi-pro, but still being a real force out there is really cool. Also, Richmond and Lionsbridge announcing a friendly, which if you don't know anything about Lionsbridge, they had one of the coolest atmospheres around. They always, I think, have a match every single year that they sell like 6,000 tickets to. They do it a couple times every single year. And last year they had a playoff game that went until 1 a.m. and they still had like 3,000 people there, and people were popping smoke after they won the game to go to the League 2 finals. Super cool. And Richmond always shows out. Like Richmond always shows out in support. So it's a super cool thing that we're starting to see League 1 taking on League 2 friendlies while League 2 is actually in season and not just playing whoever they happen to be around the area at the time.
Yeah, I also want to shout out just the opportunity. I know Phil talked about the opportunities in the communities with like player pipeline, but I'm also thinking of front office folks, design, like the people who are off the field who are getting like real world experience working with a sports franchise. And doing so in a pipeline that could also move them up. Like we talked about some really sick kits. Like there's like kits and logos and all sorts of stuff that is just such beautiful work that people are getting an opportunity to create in ways that they might not have in their hometowns or in their communities, to create these artistic expressions, or working in the front office or behind the scenes to really work their dream as well, to be, a photographer or a podcaster or ticket sales guy. You got to get in the door and you got to build that experience, right? And so these are great opportunities to try and build those experiences.
One thing with the League 2 playoff, and I need to double check the W League because they might have updated theirs as well, but League 2 now has a new playoff structure, and it is the 5 divisions in the let's see. Hold on, let me back up. So the Eastern Conference are going to have 40 clubs participate in the playoffs, and the Western Conference is going to have 32. Now that sounds like a lot, but you have to remember there are 128 clubs. Sounds like a lot, and it actually isn't that much. So the 5 divisional winners from the Mid-Atlantic, Chesapeake, South Atlantic, Northeastern, and Metropolitan will all receive an automatic bid. 6 additional teams, including second-place teams in each of those divisions, will make it, and the third-place team with the highest points per game total between Northeast and Metropolitan will gain entry into the qualifying round. And if you're wondering why those, that's because everybody is in those divisions. Every single person are in those divisions. So that is why. The Southern Conference and doesn't really have to deal with that. So it's broken up into 4 different conferences, if I understand correctly. There's a Western Conference, a Central Conference, a Southern Conference, and the Eastern Conference. The Western and the Eastern are the biggest. So ends up with a lot of people in the playoffs. If we want to go full sicko mode, we could do like a bracket challenge, but that would be absolute sicko behavior, and I don't have the time or effort to do that.
I
Rob-
want all 128 teams in the playoffs, though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do a English Premier League of all 128 teams where they have to play each other both home and away and determine a winner that way. I mean, 3 years from now,
128.
they'll crown the 2024 USL League 2 champions.
They still have
128
to.
goes perfectly into a tournament. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Everyone should make the playoffs.
They still
Counterpoint,
have to
everyone
compete.
except one team makes the playoffs.
USL League
What?
2 still has to go into the Open Cup, though. No fixture congestion, even with
No.
256 games or whatever.
Counterpoint, everyone except one team makes the playoffs.
But 128, it's like a 64 thing, but you double it. It's like March Madness, old school. We need to stop talking about playoff formats.
As far as I understand, the W League has not changed their playoff format. It's the same exact as last year, but we are starting to see a few more teams enter the fray for them, including a couple of USL professional teams join the league, which is super fun. Super excited to see what comes out of this one. Protagonist always has really good content on that one with their 2 show and their W show. We're going to try to help be involved with that a little bit more this year, but if you want people who are dedicated to that one, check that out. Let's go to Super League. Remember, people, it's been up on the screen, but we're doing Vegas and then League 2, W League, and then Super League, and then US Open Cup last. The Super League, has been rumored and talked about for several months now, to the point that I just kind of thought it was what it was. I didn't know they didn't actually get sanctioning. That the USL Super League is officially a D1 sanctioned division, with it being 8 teams entering Division 1 next year. So I wanted to give just a little bit of a breakdown on this. There was a couple of teams who have withdrawn from their inaugural season. The biggest one that made the biggest waves was Phoenix, I think, was the biggest one there. And I don't have the list in front of me, but Fort Worth, are they still in?
There's a Dallas team that's in.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're
Okay.
in.
So there's been a couple teams drop out because they were under the assumption that this was a Division 2 league when they initially signed up for it. The biggest thing for me here, okay, 2 big things, and I want to hit one later, but initially this was talked about as a Division 2 team, that they were going to have the same exact identical CBA as the USL Championship. Now that the Super League is a division above, they are going to need to get a new CBA, like actually negotiate a CBA, or else their whole mission, which was for the females and the males to be paid equally for their work, would be unbalanced, because the Division 1 team would be being paid the same as the Division 2 league and men's. So that is an interesting obstacle that I'm ready to see how they attempt to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the comparison point with the NWSL, I think they just raised the cap to a little bit under 3 million. You're looking at an average salary in the 60 to 80,000 range for a lot of the players. That's pretty comparable to what you're seeing across the USL Championship. But and Kayla, you rightly raised the fact that if we're talking about the equity of everything, it's hard to see how things square, especially given from the club perspective, there isn't a broadcast partner yet, which will be a big source of revenue. Sponsorships are still very nascent for most of these organizations. There's a lot up in the air right now in terms of that side of things, in terms of drumming up fan interest with a pretty short runway, overall, I couldn't be more bullish on the Super League, couldn't be more bullish on the leadership from Van Voort and the crew. But I think that it's going to be real interesting to see how they manage this really quickly approaching ramp-up period.
I think it's been really interesting to see how they've approached it, because really they've targeted D1 sanctioning first and foremost. Like, can we get D1? Can we meet the requirements? And then from there, does that give us enough to build out and really expand? I think in general, like you said, John, on the sponsorship side, I think landing D1 does make a difference in that regard. And it'll be on each of the clubs, like, to secure all of that and to really make the most of the sanctioning. But the league getting there does feel like a potential difference maker. What I did want to say, and this is like said somewhat tongue in cheek, but it was really funny. I thought NWSL's statement on it was like kind of messy, like, for lack of a better term, like in terms of them saying like, yeah, we know how hard it is to make a D1, like, because we're already there with our record attendances and like and sponsorship and there are limited roster spots in the NWSL, so it's nice that someone else will have places for those other players to play. Like, that felt so crazy of like, yeah, we're still, number one. But I think in general, there being competition at the D1 level is not necessarily a bad thing. And whatever direction that leads in, we'll see. But I think the USL clearly landing the D1 sanctioning was number one on USL, on the Super League's priority list.
I have a couple of things just real fast. NWSL also started with just 8 teams. So I know a couple of people were like, 8 teams isn't a league. I mean, the NWSL did it, and they have to start somewhere. Like, it's so hard to just drop a 20-team league out of nowhere. So that is something. Second, I have a couple. I have one that I wanted to come back to at the very end, assuming nobody else gets to it. But Louisville and North Carolina are in a very interesting situation because, yes, they are technically different teams with allegedly different front offices. No, they're not. So you have ownerships who are in USL Championship and NWSL. Now USL Super League's evolved. There might be a couple of interesting conflict of interest going on here. Obviously, North Carolina FC and Louisville City FC can't just jump up to MLS and all is hunky-dory. But in the end, leaving NWSL would be a massive gamble, an insane gamble on their part too. I don't know how they're going to act truly independently of each other with active competition within their own clubhouse.
Am I crazy to think that the competition between the NWSL and the Super League is going to take on a different flavor in a way where these clubs might not be as concerned? Like, this isn't going to be the heat we're seeing between Nextpro and League One, for instance. Like, because it's the men and women's game, because the NWSL is an independent entity, if you're Steve Malik, who owns the teams in Carolina, you can kind of live in both worlds, see what gives with the Super League down the road, maybe kick the can on that. There is the concern that, like, the Super League is going into DC, they're going into the New York market via Brooklyn and taking the NWSL on pretty much face-to-face there. I hope that they try to coexist and that the point of D1 was realizing that fans see anything that denotes lower leagues and lose interest. So you're just trying to get on parity, but you're not trying to go to war with the NWSL. And that would allow for the Louisvilles of the world to keep that peace. But it's going to be an interesting flashpoint because these things just tend to be troublesome when push comes to shove.
I mean, at best, we're having a rising tide is going to raise all ships, with both leagues at D1 status pushing to have the best quality of competition and professional standards for their players and clubs. At worst, we're going to have a soccer wars across both the men's and women's game in this country.
Because I'm thinking about like a neutral to all this. Like, where do your eyes go? Does it really matter what league they play in? But if there's like a distinct quality difference at the beginning, do eyes just float to NWSL and people buy into that league? And, you know, the USL markets that have teams in them do decent, but the general soccer viewing audience who is already like overwhelmed with how much content there is, like you can watch games all day long. It'll be interesting to see kind of who captures that neutral, because NWSL has been working hard at that for years to try and get that league to be recognized as one of the best in the world. I mean, you can argue that it is but it'll be interesting to see where the neutral ends up when they don't have a team in their market, if they just don't gravitate to either of them, or if they choose one league over the other and really invest in following that league, or they just realize like we have tons of soccer to watch other places, and both leagues suffer because of it. That's where I'm kind of keeping my eye on that kind of neutral party.
Selfishly, and this is kind of what I wanted to bring up, I'm a little peeved that they didn't just try to fill out the pyramid. Because like WPSL has a professional league that's going to be the third tier. There is no second tier. There is a first tier. I'm just, and it's not necessarily to the fact, because I know it's not one of those things where you could sit there and say, well, they'll just get promoted, because that's a whole nother can of worms that we're about to open on the men's side once again. But also, when you're looking at D1 sanctioning, and so I'm just going to read what Nicholas Murray just said. He wrote in the Rondo, subscribe, last week. His perception is D1 sanctioning is about setting a baseline for what Super League and its clubs is aiming to be, and that is great. It is, but it does come with the wages that come with that, right? And if you're a Division II team, you can take players 16 to the end of the NWSL roster, provide them similar contracts with playing time. Like, I can give you similar money with playing time, as opposed to now those players, if they go to D1 and they are 16 through the end of the roster, then it's just a worse product, and with the same sanctioning, and that worries me. That worries me a lot.
I would say like, and I know we're gonna jump into it, but I would say, given what we've seen happen on the men's side, like from a purely like an operational and like business standpoint for these clubs, there is no incentive to go D2, like for the good of the pyramid, because like it only hurts their bottom line. Like it doesn't help anybody to go Division 2 like artificially. Now, if there was the opportunity for, you know, a connection with NWSL, or like, you know, if we could say like, hey, this is going to build a player pathway and we're a part of that and all that, then like totally, let's talk about that. But I think at the end of the day, like all going D2 is like setting up Super League for future like subordination to NWSL that they haven't earned. Like there's no one that says like, well, they were here first, so they get to be the, you know, forever first division or something like that. It's US Soccer has the rules, and like if you meet the requirements, there's really no reason not to do it, you know.
Sure.
So, you know, however that like ends up playing out, I think there's I think there's a lot of different ways that it can go like in the future, but going D1 just, I think it makes sense because we're seeing on the men's side that like there is no incentive to be like a lower league because you end up just getting like squeezed out of it anyways. So it doesn't really matter.
That's fair. I mean, that's totally fair. It's just one of those things that like you kind of mentioned, or like Alan mentioned, if the product is worse, but you're supposedly on equal playing fields, do you miss the initial boat because people say, well, the other one's already better? And I feel like if you're D2, you already get the quote unquote benefit of the doubt of the talent's a little bit worse, but that's expected.
If you're D2, you don't even get the first step. Like people aren't going to look at you because they see minor league. They don't pay attention. So I think it's, even if it is lower quality, what does that matter when you can still just point and say D1? And frankly, most fans don't care about the quality of play to that level. Like they're not going to watch an NWSL game and be like, that first touch was cleaner, I'm watching that league. Like they want to have storylines, they want to have connections. And by getting rid of the barrier of, oh, well, this is a Division II, you're letting people engage more actively, in my opinion.
That's fair.
I think the bigger question mark for Super League is just like on the broadcast side, like already a big presence from NWSL on CBS, which is obviously the route that USL has gone like primarily on the men's side. So do you try to like differentiate and go with a different partner on the women's side, or do you say like, hey, you know, does CBS say like, hey, like domestic women's soccer lives on Paramount Plus / CBS Sports, you know, like, and it is like Super League and NWSL like coexisting on the same service, like, so that to me is like kind of an interesting next step as well.
Can I tinfoil hat real fast?
Of course.
This is my tinfoil hat moment. What if Super League is the USL's ABA moment and they're just trying to get that sweet paycheck?
I do wonder about a merger down the road. I don't think that's the intention straight up, but I do appreciate a good tinfoil hat moment.
Like,
because that map is super sexy when you combine both leagues and with potential teams. That is a very sexy map.
I mean, give me a Spokane, Seattle Reign derby.
Just give Spokane anyone.
Yeah,
They're on an island. Yeah.
Kaylor's giving the Super League like startup energy of we just get that seed money and then we get bought out and like everybody gets a fat payday.
You have to wonder if there is a price point in the league's head on, it's like, is there something like that would actually kind of tip the scales to say, hey, maybe a merger isn't so far-fetched?
Like, you want this, we want this. The only deal is get rid of the draft, for the love of God.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is the one thing that was confirmed, is that the Super League will not have a draft, which automatically makes me a bigger fan of the Super League than the NWSL. Don't get me wrong. I get very excited when I see players from, my, alma mater being drafted. But I should also just be excited that they signed for a professional club. It's weird. It's just weird. Anybody have anything else on the Super League? Okay, I'm sure this is going to be high and tight. The US Open Cup thing is happening again. We were assured that it was over, and I think in the back of our minds, we all knew it wasn't.
And that's all the time we have for tonight, guys. Have a great night.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things that are happening with this. Basically, MLS is allegedly pulling teams again, but maybe not all of the team. Oh, thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it. The
I'm about to pass out like this.
Appreciate it, Amanda. Yeah. So just to kind of get back to that, there's been a lot of what's going on here. They were originally going to pull everyone again, and then they said, actually, we're going to let like 8 of them play. They never said which 8. Just
It's
8.
going to be Orlando
MLS.
City, and that's why they put the old school logo on their kit.
Oh.
Is they're going to be the ones that represent MLS in the Open Cup.
They're going to try to sneak in like they're still a part of us. Let's they have like 8 or 9 teams competing, and then everybody's like, that's weird. And then it came out that allegedly MLS wants 40% of all non-MLS away game gate receipts, which, if you're not someone who knows, that's a lot of freaking money. But if a non-MLS team were to go to an MLS venue, MLS gets to keep 100% of the gate receipts. This is all alleged. Some of this has been talked about like in ESPN articles and other places. That's the information that I was given. But in the end, none of us are in the meetings. This is all allegedly via sources. And sources is always a scary word, so keep that in mind. I'm going to get to the other alleged things happening in the middle of this, but I just want to hear broad topic from what I just laid out.
I mean, yeah. Like USSF like flexed its muscle at the beginning, and then MLS basically flexed its muscle and said, like, without us you can't have a competition, so we're gonna take like all of the money that could be made in any of these games. And I think what they were trying to do, if that proposal is true, I think they're trying to give US Soccer and the rest of the teams basically something that they can't possibly accept, right? Like financially, like a USL team opening its doors to give away 40% of the gate, it doesn't even make sense to host that game anymore. Like the financial like incentive to play that game is completely gone. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like extremely disheartening, but it's not unexpected, I guess, at this point.
And even with the just MLS saying, it's like we'll only have like a handful of our teams play in the tournament this year. This really is just kicking the can down the road that we're going to be back here in 2025 with the same issue, with MLS now having even more leverage on their own end, that they could still just pull the teams out of the tournament next year. That this really doesn't solve a long-term issue with the league or with the competition. This is just putting a Band-Aid over it now. And when you have a World Cup happening in 2 years, as the world basically turns its attention to how we run the sport in this country, it's getting really concerning on how they're going to view it in the rest of the world.
Just real fast, I know we're talking about this, but this is also kind of pertinent when it comes to the US Open Cup with streaming and whatnot, because streaming rights is kind of the big deal with this. Apparently Fubo TV is suing Disney, Fox, and the Warner Brothers right now.
Well, it's because they're trying to do that combined service. This doesn't mean much because, I mean, I guess I don't know anyone who uses Fubo. Sorry to the Fubo listeners.
I'm sorry to
Here we
this
go.
man.
Yeah, Alan. Yeah.
Yeah, suck it, Alan.
It was one of the few streaming places that I could get soccer and RuPaul's Drag Race for a minute. So that's how I had priorities, man. It was a while ago, and I just haven't changed. It's like every time you go to change, you're like, this is more work than just continuing to pay Fubo at this point. So I just pay them for convenience.
No, but I mean, like back on the open topic, I mean, MLS has invented competitions for their own profit interest, like the Leagues Cup, etc. Then they come back and claim fixture congestion and say that they're only going to participate in the Open Cup if they get the most outrageous revenue split that you can imagine. And by the way, when I did the backyard piece on the Open Cup a couple weeks back, the attendance difference between USL teams against each other and against lower division opponents and that of MLS opponents, it's triple the attendance every time you're getting an MLS team in town. So for them to come and say, guess what, we want most of that money and you don't get a benefit on the flip side, patently ridiculous. Like Phil said, I believe, I mean, it's just dead on arrival. It's an offer that they know is going to get turned down. I've seen a proposal of MLS keeping 8 proper teams in the tournament, 9 Next Pro teams being in, and then the 9 clubs that are in the CONCACAF Champions League just won't send a representative, which is such a hodgepodge Frankenstein's monster of a solution that it is just a mess. And it really is the first foot in the door to say, well, guess what? We had 9 teams out. Next season, we're excluding 18, gradually working their way to the point of not being involved at all. MLS ought to be the steward for the sport in this country, somebody that encourages fans from the grassroots upwards to have something to strive for. And they're simply failing at that duty, looking out for their own interests in a way that's detrimental to the game in America. You really just hate to see it.
And when you have so many like high profile USL to MLS transfers, like just this offseason, right? Where you're like pointing, or even over the last couple of seasons, taking into account, you know, Luna, Barajas, and others moving from USL to the league, rather than highlight the fact that like, hey, we have a thriving second division that like we also benefit from having, right? Like they would rather that just be under their umbrella, that like they hate the fact that USL is something that people that they have to pay money for their players. Like they really hate that. They hate that the old days are gone where they could just pick people out of USL teams that they liked. And just that lack of control, like is so, I think like it's becoming very clear that the lack of control of any soccer property in the US like is truly like unacceptable to MLS. Like they cannot suffer anyone else to benefit from the game in this country. And I know I get worked up about it, but it's just like it's becoming so plain. And this is them putting their cards on the table. Like this is them saying, we are putting our money behind like our own streaming service, our own competitions. Like we do not want to participate, and we are going to set the conditions in which we participate in the game in this country. The federation cannot tell us how to conduct ourselves, which is insane, because even the most powerful clubs on earth are beholden to their federation and beholden to the confederation like of their continent, which we saw with the whole Super League stuff. Like all it took was UEFA being like, you will be expelled from the Champions League. Like you won't be able to play continental competition. And that killed like any talk of, you know, that. And at the end of the day, like right now, MLS, we have 2 MLS teams playing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup tonight, in a competition that MLS has essentially reshaped to fit like to fit them more, you know, more so than anyone else. And so, yeah, they just are exerting their control as much as possible, not just at the national level, but at the continental level as well.
I mean, they're tearing a page out of the NFL playbook that they have to be the one entity in this country that controls the direction of the sport. I mean, we saw from when they were doing the just kind of general federation meetings that they still have a majority voting share of all the professional leagues within this country, that they could, in essence, do what they want. I mean, the NASL still has a vote within the federation rules right now. It's not, unfortunately, the 19 votes that John's really funny graphic was posted online, but it's still a concern that, like, you had mentioned it, Phil, like when you look at the FA Cup, the teams involved in that, every match, they split the gate receipts, each get a 45% cut, regardless of where the venue is, who's involved. And it's just so disheartening to see that MLS has basically turned this competition into how can we extract the most money out of basically every person involved to make the 29 owners plus Don Garber the richest people in the sport.
It's almost like MLS is behaving like an American corporation whose sole purpose is to benefit their shareholders and owners? Question mark.
What?
No.
Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned Continental. Allegedly, again, this is all, nothing has been put out there into, when I say public, they each, for people who don't fully understand how the media works, which I think a lot of people do, but I wanted to get it out there. Each person that leaks things have a reason to do it. If a company wanted to control the narrative, admittedly, they would put out an official statement on their own. And when you hear stuff like sources say, or, rumor says, which usually is another way of saying sources say without, which ends up giving you the benefit of the doubt if it's wrong by calling it a rumor. I'm guilty. I did it earlier. It's just one of those things that whoever told you that has a narrative that they are trying to push from their perspective. Okay. So sources have said that CONCACAF has said that if you pull out of US Open Cup, we won't give a spot to the US Open Cup anymore, which all that did was just say, hey, MLS, do what you want, because you don't have to worry about a League One, a championship, or a NISA team competing with you in the Champions League and embarrassing you on the biggest stage in our continent. The second part of that, to me, is I saw some people say, well, they can't do that. Look at, I think it's the FA Vase, maybe, and the Papa John's Trophy, or whatever it is now. Basically, the lower league equivalents of the FA Cup and the EFL Trophy, which the FA Cup and the EFL Trophy in England gets you into Europe. If you win those, you go to European competition. If you win the Papa John's Trophy or the FA Vase, you don't, because it didn't include the top divisions. CONCACAF has major background of saying, or like, what's the word for it? Basically, they have another comparison to look at to say England does the same thing. If the US Open Cup is just a lower league competition, we don't have to give them access to our highest league or highest competition in the continent. And so for people saying they can't do that, they have the equivalent to look at already.
I think the last thing I'll say on it is when the head of the competitions, like the US Open Cup committee, resigns over the changes that he's being asked to make to the competition, we know that something pretty drastic is about to be like unleashed. And yeah, so as much as a lot of this is like reportedly and allegedly, like when you have a figure like that step down, like rather than face the changes that are happening to the competition he's in charge of, like we can expect it to be really drastic. And I think in the aftermath of COVID, where the competition got canceled for the first time literally in its history, and then it was played in a modified format like for a year before sort of returning, and there was this big sort of like, the cup is back and all this stuff, like for a year later for us to be like, oh, we're just going to do away with this, century old competition. It just is depressing. Like, I don't really know how else to like phrase it. 'Cause it is, I think when we said like a pandemic was the only thing that stopped it from happening, and then MLS clubs are like, well, hold my beer. So yeah, it's pretty brutal, and I don't know like what the fallout from it's going to be. I think there is still the question that like not a lot of people, it's sort of the elephant in the room that nobody's really talking about, but the NASL lawsuit over the professional league whatever
Standards.
standards. Yeah. Jeez. Like the PLS, like the fact that that's still out there, and the idea that, hey, we are alleging that US soccer applies these like arbitrarily, that is going to gain some traction if there isn't consequences to MLS like affecting this competition. So I don't know.
I guess when MLS comes in with the advantage they have in terms of the inroads they've made historically, the financial backing they have, the way that they command eyeballs, what do the PLS matter in that context? Like, even if the NASL lawsuit is successful, which it's amazing that that thing is still going and hasn't been thrown out because, like, the NASL. Like, I don't know. I'm in a very pessimistic mode of things feel like they're very determined with the way this is going to go, and MLS, because of all of the systematic advantages they have, and it comes down to the money at the end of the day, it seems like it's an insurmountable hill to get over to fight for the best interests of the sport in this country, which to a certain extent do fall in line with MLS's priorities. But on issues like the Open Cup, it's stark when there is a discrepancy. So yeah, moral of the story, pessimistic.
Speaking of CONCACAF Champions League, Nicholas Murray just put in here, Sarasota Paradise alum Jose Kajima just scored on his debut, which is super cool because I think he technically just signed today, but he was a part, if I'm remembering correctly, the USL League 2 like best 11. If you didn't see him, if I'm thinking of the same right guy, which I may not be, Jose Kajima has a crazy free kick on him. Kid can take a free kick with the best of them. Disgustingly good. And this is where I am going to say the buzzword that I just talked about earlier. Allegedly, sources, rumor,
Tinfoil.
that tinfoil hat, because that's already gone well for me. But this is not tinfoil hat. From what I was told by sources that I do trust, that the USL is looking to pull out, or some clubs are looking to pull out of competition. Let me reiterate this. Clubs, not league. Clubs are having this discussion because if this proposed MLS gets 40% of non-MLS away day gate receipts, they would be pulling out that. And I know some people were asking why. Clubs still have to pay appearance fees. They still have to pay bench fees. They still have to pay scoring fees. They still have to pay clean sheet fees. They still have to, anything like that. Any kind of fees that come around, they apply to the U.S. Open Cup. The player played, they should get paid for it. If a refs, they should get paid for it. Different issue, but still the same thing. League has to pay the refs. They have to. That's club money going to these people. There is a lot. The stadium has to be on. Right? The big purse that keeps some teams alive for another year, 40% of that would be taken away, but the same isn't returned to them. So basically, there are clubs that are looking at leaving the competition because of this. And I am going to throw out two things here. One, if the USL championship teams decide to do this, they are, despite it being for valid reasons, they are also contributing to the downfall. Don't look at me like that, Phil. Don't do it. Don't do it. No.
I'm going to.
No.
Continue.
Because,
you had a second thing. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. They are also partial. Now, I don't mean that they're the main part, but in the end, they will be not equally, but they will be seen as side villains in this story of they didn't do it for the love of the cup. It was about money. If they pull out, the USL is also saying it was about money and not about the cup. The second thing, and I don't always like to be, and I say this, I posted about it just on Twitter a second ago. Sometimes I do like to be a little contrarian just for a point of conversation, but the USL is not a gleaming beam of hope. I know a lot of people see it as the best thing we got, but also it has its massive flaws. They have actively tried to kill clubs. They have gone in other places where clubs exist. And if you want to be for the love of the game, there's a reason why League One has their own little mid-season tournament and the championship isn't involved. Some teams just don't view it as worth their time. And I don't want this to just end up being MLS is the only one that's bad. There is a wider spread issue here, which is money is the root of all of this. Yes, MLS is the biggest dollar bill sign, and they are the ones that have the most money, yet they're making it all about money when the money that they're losing is a drop in the bucket to them. I get that. But in the end, systematically, from top to bottom, the cup is not about the cup anymore. It is about money.
I will say that Richmond Kickers CEO Rob, I can't pronounce the last name.
Fair.
No, it's like Ucrop or something like
Ucrop.
Rob.
But the Richmond Kickers CEO, they posted a really good statement earlier today mentioning that they will intend to play in the U.S. Open Cup in whatever form that it may take, just simply because it's their obligation to play in the National Cup competition for this country, whether it was in its current iteration or whether it's with MLS taking a 40% cut.
I mean, and I get where you're coming from, Kaylor, because I think there is something to that in terms of like, is it something that we do because like if we're gonna take the righteous sort of, you know, holier than thou approach of like, well, you shouldn't care about the money in MLS, then like we probably also need to do that. And operationally opening your doors, like knowing that you're going to lose money is not an easy thing for a lot of clubs operating at a D2 and D3 level. So I think in general, my whole thing is that it's very ironic that basically MLS got, you know, waivers to operate in the way that it does as a way to protect their finances. And the like heel turn in all of this is that they are now so financially like impregnable that they can afford to not they don't have to comply like with these sort of international standards. So it is just funny to me that it's like when they were just like a little fledgling league, it was like, no, we need these like financial protections or we won't be viable. And now it's like there's such a juggernaut that they also don't have to comply with the with any way that like people typically do business or, you know, FIFA standards, all that stuff. And not that FIFA's like a glowing whatever
Notoriously good guys, FIFA.
Right. But in terms of the sporting merit stuff, it's funny because MLS and USSF has gotten sort of like the blessing of FIFA to operate differently than the rest of the world. Whereas like if we tried this, you know, us and Australia are the only two places that like operate in the way that we do. So anyways, it's just funny that the heel turn in the end is like we are now so financially sound that we don't have to listen to you.
But it's not just opening your doors at operational loss. It's opening your doors at an operational loss to the financial benefit of MLS. I think is where it
Yeah,
really is upsetting. It's not like, hey, you're opening your like, hey, we're going to lose money on this because it's a weeknight and we're only going to get like 1,500 people here. Like that's a reality for a lot of the US clubs, like USL clubs. Mm-hmm. Like they just can't get people to come out to that game. But now I have to open my doors in an environment that I might actually get some folks to come out. And MLS is like, well, they're only coming out because of us. And I get that argument, but it's like, but I'm now paying this other entity that doesn't really need this, right? Like, how much was San Diego? $5 billion? Like, they don't need basically the 40% of the gates. It's like it's purposely vindictive to purposely hurt lower league clubs. Like it's not like we're trying to recoup our operating costs, because you get travel expenses paid and you're fine. You're fine. And it seems very purposeful. And so I understand the take of like, if you pull out, you're just as bad as MLS of putting a nail into the coffin. And I can understand that argument. But I think when it's, I have to do this and then I have to pay this other entity that's actively trying to not only kill the tournament, but kill my franchise and kill my, my team. It just doesn't sit well. It feels very purposeful.
I can fix the quote unquote match congestion issue, which is not an issue. Do what everybody else does and move it to a weekend. And if you make it far enough, just postpone the matches. Guess what? USL clubs do it. They schedule midweek matches, and sometimes they have to postpone them. It doesn't take an act of God to postpone a match and to reschedule it. All it takes is just a little bit of brain power.
Just don't ask New Mexico.
I will say, I do think match congestion is genuinely a problem, but it's a problem that they invented by making Leagues Cup, by adopting the most insanely long-winded playoff format you can possibly imagine. MLS did it and the roster rules play a part, because MLS is hamstringing themselves and pretending like they can't call up oodles of players that they have in MLS Next Pro. They're acting like they can't use the end of their benches. The way things are set up, it is a problem. But again, it's MLS inventing that problem at the same time.
I was about to say,
chicken and the egg. Yeah.
I was about to say, though, I don't even think I know roster rules has been quoted a lot, but somebody did the math on it before, and I need somebody else to kind of back me up or find this for me. The average team, like, they use basically 15 point something players per season. Like, when you consider the amount of minutes that are gotten in the total amount of minutes, that's split amongst 15 point something players per season. Just use your 18. You have 18 of them bad boys just on the bench, and you don't use
seems
them.
like psycho math, I will say.
Yeah, it does seem like psycho math. I get it. But like, if you're only using essentially just your 18, you're rolling out essentially the same 18 every single week, then just rotate, bro. Like, if you've ever played a Football Manager or FIFA, you have to rotate the team, or else your players die.
That MLS teams know that. MLS teams are doing that. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but people are saying the roster rules are archaic. Their practices just aren't. Like, forget the roster rules. They can fix the problem themselves by starting the guy that doesn't normally make the 18.
So, Kaylor, I quickly looked for MLS for their 2023 season, and this is just for their regular season, or just for their league games, so no Leagues Cup games. The fewest amount of players used in a rotation was Philadelphia Union on 23, with the most amount of players used by a team was Toronto on 39, and if you're looking for an American team, it was Miami on 36.
Okay, so they already use that amount of players, which contradicts my opinion, what I just said, but also 36 players is more than enough to play a full tournament. USL teams don't have that many people on their roster, and they survive.
Yeah, I think like you said, the match congestion, and one of the things that people have been going back to, and if anyone follows like the cup.us, who has obviously done a great job in covering a lot of this, just re-emphasizing the fact that US Open Cup's roster rules changed a few years ago to where if your roster is valid in the league that you participate in, then it is valid for the Open Cup, because they were having a bunch of disqualifications for like random stuff. And they were like, hey, especially for the amateur sides, like, let's just simplify this as much as possible. If you have a valid roster for your league competition, then it is valid in the Open Cup. So literally the only barrier to MLS like being able to use more players in the Open Cup is MLS. Like, that is the only barrier.
Right.
MLS's new slogan, making a mountain out of a molehill.
They are that meme of the kid with the bicycle and sticks the.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, or I mean, there's so many classics, hot dog guy from I Think You Should Leave. Like we're all trying to find the guy who did this. There's so many classics.
The Eric Andre show.
Look, we can talk around in circles and hit the same points that everybody else is hitting. I just think, for me personally, the last thing I must say on this is that I understand if USL teams say that this is not financially viable for us to stay in this because losing that amount of money is detrimental. I do understand. But in the end, it still just relays the same fact of why MLS is also leaving, which is the money ain't there. And so if the money is the reason you're leaving, you are just proving their point, which doesn't make you any better.
To the USL Championship clubs, just demand 40% of the gate from every lower league club, and just the shit can keep rolling downhill.
My Sunday league
City
team
better
is
pay up.
Hey, I mean, at least Locomotive should pull it up to Union Omaha like I'm leaving here with something.
But Jeff gets 40% of all tickets.
Central Valley Fuego get 40% of everybody's gates.
Chandler Hoffman have to pay his tutoring fees somehow.
Brutal. Oh man, I don't know where to go from here. It's all falling apart.
Yeah, and I mean, if USL champion, I will say in all seriousness, if USL Championship clubs are looking for a quick way out of the tournament, just the El Paso Locomotive has not made it beyond their first game, so like you can just like look to them for any tips. Just go get smacked by a League One team, and yeah, then you won't even have to worry about an MLS taking your gates. So you'll be fine.
I mean, just say no. Like, I don't want to take the MLS approach and say, what if I don't?
I love the idea of a lawsuit over like tens of thousands of dollars between a USL club and MLS.
Wouldn't that just go to petty court? Like
small court.
I think in California it's $10,000 or less. So it very well could go, in some instances, could go to just small claims court.
I want to see Don Garber have to represent MLS at every single one of these small claims court.
Oh, that's hilarious.
NASL shows up with their lawyers to every single one just to watch.
End up on daytime TV.
Yeah, this is some real Judge Judy type content right here.
See, and this is what you should have wrote about on Protagonist. This is the new show, because I would watch.
eight U.S. soccer lawsuits that should be turned into daytime TV shows. Judge
next up on People's Court. Boom, boom, boom.
I was gonna say, yeah, bring in Wapner. Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Oh man.
All right, so I'm glad we solved that. Good job, guys. If anybody from the US Open, USSF, I guess they're the ones that decide this. If you have any ideas, we didn't have any, but you should listen. There it is. Any final USL thoughts or anything for the night? No. You should read what Ryan did with Bob Lilly joining Liverpool. That was fun.
The plot twist in that really, like, that got me. Because I'm like, oh, this is kind of going exactly how I'd think, and then just the left field ending to season 1 is worth the click alone.
I think the way I had it set up, I was disappointed at the end of the save that none of the current Liverpool players listed Bob Lilly as among their favorite personnel.
Can you name a single player for Pittsburgh Riverhounds that would have him listed as their favorite personnel?
I'm sure it's coded into the game. I was just more laughing that one of the players that they managed to sign during the save was Trevor Chalobah from in this universe, Chelsea. And I just want to see, like, how was the negotiation sitting down of him at Anfield negotiating to get basically a player like Trevor Chalobah to go to Merseyside.
Yeah, I was going to say Forbes. Pretty much everyone who made the Rochester-Pittsburgh jump probably had a good reason to do so.
True.
He goes to Liverpool. He's still signing some Division II soccer player, and it's like, you're going to love this. You guys have not seen this before. You're going to love it. All right. Look, there's a lot of content to catch up on. Phil, John, Ryan have all been putting out some good, fun stuff. In the description, and I'm going to pull it up right now and put it in the chat. I should have done this a long time ago, but I didn't. Next week is our USL Championship preview show, and a part of that preview show is talking about the people's basically final predictive standings, and some of them are already fun. So the way it's going to work is that you take each team and each person, whatever place they say. So, for example, if 6 of you have decided to say Detroit City's going to finish first, and then 6 of you have decided that they are going to finish dead last, and so you would take 6. So the 6 times 1, so 6 plus 6 times 12. Let's see if I can do that in my head. Is that 72?
PEMDAS. PEMDAS, Taylor. PEMDAS.
The fact that we got you explaining playoff formats and doing math on one episode is unreal.
Yeah, no. Is it 72? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so those two numbers, the 6 plus 72, 78 divided by 12. Basically whoever ends up with the lowest number is first. Whoever ends up with the next lowest is second. It works out. So a couple, it's 78 total. Sure. So that means my math was right. Let's go.
We're having people predict the table, and we're going to share the results.
Yeah.
You could just say AP voting format.
Yeah. Well, that's no more helpful.
So basically, TLDR, that's how it's going to work. So if you decide to go in and say this team is going to be last for the memes, it's not just like whoever has the highest like little bell curve. It's total vote. So there's that.
Next season, can we do the Electoral College version?
If you get the most votes, you get all the votes.
All I know is San Diego's going undefeated this season.
Along with Wilmington.
And yet somehow the Miami still finishes last. Bless them. So far that's been the only unanimous vote. Yeah. That's going to be for next week. Super excited for that. Check out Kid Season. Check out for the glove of the game, please. I'm just going to beg into the ether at the very end. Like, just check out for the glove of the game. All the plugs, all of the things. Final thoughts, Phil.
Yeah. So TV wise, I don't watch a ton of reality TV, but I was looking for a way to stretch that Peacock subscription that I have for Premier League games. And if anyone is not watching The Traitors, it is the best reality TV show ever. It is literally a game of, some people call it Mafia, some people call it murder mystery. But like that party / like children's party game where one person is like the murderer and you're trying to figure out who it is. That is this reality show, and it's a bunch of people from like Bravo and E and like The Bachelor and Survivor and Big Brother, like all put in this mansion in Scotland, and they play a game of Mafia, and it's so good. Yes, exactly. See, we've got sickos in the chat, Traitors sickos in the chat. So yeah, that is what I'm watching right now. I'm absolutely obsessed. Oh, and Alan Cumming hosts it. It's absolutely like, I mean, it is unbelievable television.
Beautiful. John?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I should plug. I've been writing so much preview content. It's frankly ridiculous.
Take a
You've
rest.
seen a lot of it on the Substack. I've got a lot more coming out the next couple weeks on Backheeled. I've got another collaboration with somebody who's in the chat today coming up at some point soon. So looking forward to all of that. And then I'm seeing the re-release of Tenet on Friday, which is a movie that's just all vibes, no logic. I cannot wait. Temporal pincer movement, the whole 9 yards.
I love that movie.
So good.
Ryan?
Yeah, so Phil had mentioned it, I think, on our last episode, but I have at least started watching The Bear as well. So I'm looking forward to kind of diving into that show. I saw the at least pilot yesterday, so I'm excited to just watch more of it.
Wonderful.
No Madam Web takes or
I saw Madam Web over the weekend, and I thought it was less bad than people are saying.
Glowing recommendation.
Morbius comes to Disney Plus on March 1st, and it's now my favorite thing happening in March, taking a new top spot away from sports betting coming legal to North Carolina.
Alan?
I mean, obviously, RuPaul's Drag Race is going on. UK versus the World just started, and so there's just so much content being pumped out in the Drag Race world. And then we started watching the reimagining of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring
Oh yeah.
Donald Glover, who is kind of a man crush in our household. Like, we will watch anything and everything that man does. And so I watched episode. She's watched a bunch of it, and I'm just watched episode 1, and it is very engaging. It's funny. It's action packed, and you get to see Donald Glover acting again. And so I missed him since he left, since Atlanta kind of finished, which is another series which is wild. So that's what we've been doing.
Is he a part of the Community movie coming out?
He will be,
Yes.
yes.
It is, yeah.
oh, that's amazing.
So excited. Let's see. For me, nothing really on the TV. Actually, Catherine, my wife, was very upset because we missed the child's baking show that was on yesterday. We forgot that yesterday was Monday. There is a children's baking show that we have become very obsessed with. We thought it was going to be something really stupid.
Are the
And-
children baking, or are people baking children?
Oh my.
I think there
That's
was
Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
There was a movie a couple years ago about that one. But it's like children's baking challenge or something like that. And so I don't know. It's just a bunch of kids just baking and being really talented, really fun. I didn't think I was going to be as invested in it, and now I am actively rooting for and against children, which is a bizarre place to be, but here we are. So, yes, Nicholas, Hansel and Gretel situation.
Keep putting the kid in the oven, you know?
It's just a bunch of witches coming up with different ways.
The children baking challenge.
It's a Halloween special. Comes out every year.
I forgot that there was a really weird, rated R Hansel and Gretel film from 2013 that has Jeremy Renner acting in it for some reason. 6 stars on IMDb.
All right.
We need to ban these weird, bad adaptations of fairy tales and the public domain stuff. It's just a mess.
Yeah, like the Winnie the Pooh and
Right.
yeah, it's just please stop.
The open cup.
Oh man.
There it is.
What a
And,
way. What a way to close it.
Yep. And just like that, with fittingly Alan's voice. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.